I think the relationships with farmers are not purely transactional. Right? So a local aggregator is essentially the guy who would, you know, in Hindi we say कि मैयत भागवत शादी तीनों वही फाइनेंस करता है, right? So it's not a clear um, equation that I pay higher prices, so I'm giving more value to the farmer, because the farmer, needs multiple things at multiple times. So that ecosystem, I think we thought that the traditional supply chain serves it better. Third, given that these traders have built their domain expertise over generations, right? So a trader might be doing a particular variety of a crop for 3-4 generations. It seemed foolish to not leverage it, right? So not leverage that domain expertise. So given all these things, we decided that we would let the unorganized sector do the things that it's good at, and we should focus on things where the unorganized sector has clear gaps. So there are gaps around data analysis, there are gaps around financing options, there are gaps around actually using tech. So we should focus on that, and stay away from things which the current supply chain is doing a good job at.
Hi everyone, I'm your host Siddharth Aluwalia. Before we dive deep into this week's conversation, I would like to thank our sponsors, Prime Venture Partners, for constantly supporting us. Prime Venture Partners is an early stage VC fund led by Sanjay Swami, Shripati Acharya, and Amit Somani. Prime was started in 2012 with the objective of bringing Silicon Valley style professionalism to venture investing and building world class companies out of India. Prime has invested in 35 plus startups and is often the first institutional investor in category creating tech startups such as Quizzes, Callpal, Sunstone University, and Winwall. You can check more about Prime Venture Partners on primevp.in. Today I have with me Nukul Upadhye, founder of Bijak. An Ernst& Young 2020 study pegs the Indian AgriTech market potentially at $24 billion dollars by 2025, and there are about 600 to 700 agri-tech startups in India serving the farmers, the kisans of India. Bijak is one of the startups which is leading the forefront and setting examples for the others. Founding in 2019 by Mahesh Jakotia, Daya Rai, Nukul Upadhye, Nikhil Tripathi, and Jitendra Bedwal, Bijak is a B2B marketplace for agricultural commodities that connects millions of buyers, sellers, traders, wholesalers, food processors, retailers, and most importantly, the farmers. Bijak has scaled in more than 1,000 regions across 28 states and facilitated trade of over 110 agri commodities. Bijak today is doing transactions of more than 300 crores on a monthly basis. So first of all, congrats Nukul for creating such an impact for the real Bharat, which we say. 70% of the Bharat are farmers, are kisans, and you have certainly made a dent in their lives.
Thanks a lot, Siddharth. Thanks a lot for the kind words, and really happy, glad to be on this podcast. I've been a listener for a long time now, so this is one podcast that I look forward to every week.
Thank you so much. Nukul, would like to understand from you uh, how did you identify the problem you are solving before starting this up?
Right, right. So I think it's a mix of a couple of things, right? So one is of course the rational thinking, right? What's the market size? What's the severity of the problem? So agri has been massive uh, for a long time now. So there's nothing new about agri being a $300 billion or a $400 billion space. What has changed though is now it has become crackable, right? So there's a lot of internet penetration, there's a lot of mobile penetration that we have seen in the last few years, which means that a problem which existed for a long time now can have tech or tech-enabled solutions. So, so the timing felt right. The market size was big enough. The other
Yeah.
aspect is, of course, the emotional part, right? if you are going to spend the prime years of your life solving a problem, uh, that problem better be very close to your heart, right? So I come from a farming family, so I was, born and brought up in a place called Dhar in MP, right? So where the primary source of income for the family was farming and farming allied activities. We did, tractors, cultivators, duck foods, that sort of thing. So I think, for a lot of folks, uh, it's not ideal, but for a lot of farming families, the goal is to get their kids as away from farming as possible, as far from farming as possible. That's what my family also did. So, I after my schooling, I joined BITS Pilani, did my engineering from there,
Yeah.
joined an investment bank immediately after, so worked with JPM for some years, did my MBA from University of Virginia. So um, did a lot of things to move away from farming, right? But
Yeah.
by the time you have spent those years, right, so you realize that you essentially want to go back and solve a problem that your family faced and the
Yeah.
people around you faced. So that was the emotional connect with the problem, right? So I wanted to do something in the agri space. There were just two industries that shaped my life, right? So one was edutech, the other was agritech, right? So education allowed me to experience other parts of the world, allowed me to meet smarter folks, and agritech allowed agriculture allowed my family to actually invest in my education.
Yeah.
So those were the two problems that I looked at when I was moving back here. Education, I felt that with or without me, the industry is doing well, right? So there were so many smart entrepreneurs who were already trying to solve the problem. So the marginal utility seemed pretty low for myself, right?
Yeah.
So agri, that's how I decided to do something in the agri space. And then within agri, I think there are ways of identifying top of the mind problem, the problem that can have massive impact, right? To me, there are so many things which can be improved in the agri ecosystem right now. But the top of the mind problem for every farmer, for every trader, is to be able to sell their produce at a good price, right? So getting better realization for the crop seem to be the core problem across the board. And so we decided to do something about that.
And
That's
when you were identifying this problem, right, of creating a B2B marketplace, what are the other adjacent problems that you choose to say no to? Because, right, doing something right is as important as choosing it, as important as saying no to five other things or 10 other things.
hmm. So I think the other adjacent parts were around some of the pre-harvest things that are really exciting. So you can increase the farmer's income in two ways, right? So one is help them grow better crops, help them get better yield, and once the harvest is out, help them get better prices for it or reduce wastage. So the most logical adjacent problem was to do something on the input side, do something on the crop advisory side. We decided against it, and decided to go for the problem that we are solving right now, because we felt that it's sometimes very common for us people, including us, to assume that farmer needs help with what he's doing, right? Wherein we come in and it's almost some uh, sort of arrogance that we have, that we can teach him to do farming, which seemed incorrect to us, right? So we realized that we should focus on things that we can be good at. We didn't feel that crop advisory is something we could really be good at. The other thing that led to the decision was it becomes very easy to change behavior when you have when you are able to give assurance of liquidity, right? So I can come in and ask the farmer to grow pulses instead of sugarcane
Yeah.
because the soil quality is such, or the water availability is such. Uh, but doing that is much more difficult by just educating the farmer versus actually creating an infrastructure where pulses have as much liquidity as sugarcane does, have as much price consistency as sugarcane does, right? So if there's a sugarcane mill or sugar mill 20 kilometers away from a farm, and pulses have some sort of uh, opaqueness in terms of how much liquidity you'll get after the harvest, that decision becomes difficult. So we have seen that, it's, if I can consistently give a higher price for a particular variety of potato to farmers because I have created market linkage infrastructure for that, the farmer automatically in a couple of years moves to that high yield variety, because he can see that there's a clear market demand, there's enough liquidity, and there's predictability when it comes to prices. So
And
that's what led us to work on the output side, and I think B2B marketplace seemed the right way to crack it.
and how are you different from traditional offerings or your more agri-tech competitors?
So I think in terms of difference when it comes to traditional offerings, a lot of a lot of startups have taken slightly different approach in terms of disintermediating the middlemen, right? So disintermediating the traders. We believe that the problem is so complex, the market is so fragmented, that you need the support of the existing ecosystem, right? So you cannot go in and try to just disrupt the existing ecosystem and be a replacement for it, right? So you're talking about thousands of regions, hundreds of crops, being able to do farm to fork there or farm to
Yeah.
retail there, is difficult. I think the relationships with farmers are not purely transactional, right? So a local aggregator is essentially the guy who would, in Hindi we say कि मैयत भागवत शादी तीनों वही फाइनेंस करना है, right? So it's
Right.
not a clear um, equation that I pay higher prices, so I'm giving more value to the farmer, because the farmer,
Yeah.
needs multiple things at multiple times. So that ecosystem, I think we thought that the traditional supply chain serves it better. Third, given that these traders have built their domain expertise over generations, right? So a trader might be doing a particular variety of a crop for 3 4 generations. It seemed foolish to not leverage it, right? So not leverage that domain expertise. So given all these things, we decided that we would let the unorganized sector do the things that it's good at, and we should focus on things where the unorganized sector has clear gaps. So there are gaps around data analysis, there are gaps around financing options, there are gaps around actually using tech. So we should focus on that, and stay away from things which the current supply chain is doing a good job at, right? So that's the approach we took. So we do do our job in a very enabler kind of a mindset, right? So we work with all this other agri-tech startups on a regular basis. We work with traders, we work with processors, and we try to enable each participant of the supply chain rather than competing with them.
And Nukul, can you take an example of how a trade is facilitated at Bijak, and connecting all the parties?
Yes. So I think the current way of is a typical supplier who's can be a source mandi trader or a local aggregator who works directly with farmers at farm gate level, uh, works with less than 10 buyers throughout his lifetime, right? So he knows that there are, millions of other buyers out there, but he continues to trade with the same set of guys because he has built trust with them, right? Any 11th buyer for him is a major risk. Now this trust deficit, because all the transactions happen on credit, because price discovery more often than not happens at destination, there are uncertainties around how quality would be assessed. So all these uncertainties where they, force a supplier or a local aggregator or a farmer to trade with the same set of guys, uh, actually forces them to, leave money on the table, right? So it's the inefficiency comes from trust deficit rather than from information asymmetry. A trader in Kanpur knows that he can get better prices in Guntur instead of Hyderabad. But would he take the risk to supply 5 lakhs worth of produce to Guntur, to someone who he has never met with, where the paperwork is minimal, right? So what the platform does for the trader is solve for this trust deficit, right? So we essentially track the transaction history of all our users. Uh, how much is the price that you paid the supplier? How much was the delay in payments? What's the quantum of quality deduction that you have? What's the behavior when the market crashes? How many times do you refuse to take delivery? So all these parameters, we rate these buyers so that supplier can actually make a more informed choice and actually have enough information to trust the other guy. And when the transaction actually happens, so when buyer and seller speak to each other, we then constantly track everything that goes on, whether the produce was dispatched on time, how much was the shrinkage in transit, what was the delivery timeline, then so it creates an incentive for our users to behave in a fair way, right? So a buyer who meets his commitments all the time, or a supplier who meets his commitments all the time, gets access to the best buyers and suppliers on the platform, right? So they are able to increase their volume, they are able to get better prices, get better payment terms, because they have been consistent in their behavior, right? And they are close to the commitment that they gave. So, which essentially allows our users to, see better prices, better payment terms. So this is what happens. A supplier comes on the platform, looks for buyers, looks at their ratings, based on where the supplier is located and the grade and the variety of the commodity that he's trading in. Bijak recommends a set of buyers. These buyers, we have history built for them. Supplier decides to sell to them. All the transaction documents are shared through the app. The payment flows through the app. So he gets paid on time. So we process, I think, close to upwards of $300 million of payments, right, through the platform as well. So that's the typical way. And at the end of the transaction, we rate both suppliers and buyers objectively on all these parameters. So that's how we do business. I think our users have been able to supply to more locations now because of Bijak, have 3x, 4x their volumes uh, through the platform. They are able to discover better prices and are getting paid faster. So all that kind of creates that stickiness on the platform where users want to continue trading through the platform again and again.
Got it. And can you outline the challenges you have faced from the initial journey till now? Like, as you mentioned, trust has been one of the biggest issues. How did you create
Hmm.
that trust in traders, farmers?
Hmm. So I think there's no shortcut for building trust, right? So we brainstorm around hacks for it so many times, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to delivering on the promise consistently every day for a long period of time, right? So there's it sometimes takes months, sometimes years to build that trust. And so that's what we have done. I think the other challenge to do that was, for our recommendation engine to work well, we need to have enough data about our users, about how they are transacting, what kind of their transaction behavior, and all that data is unavailable, right? So agri historically has been a pen and paper, offline payments kind of an industry. So getting our users to do transactions digitally, do payments digitally, allow us to create a transaction trail. I think that was a massive challenge, right? Fortunately for us, what worked was the problem was so big for our users, that they were willing to adjust, willing to slightly change their behavior, for the hope that this problem of being able to identify the right counterparty, that problem gets resolved.
And what have been the other challenges when you were starting up? Let's say in raising capital, in identifying the first set of geography that you want to operate in, and building scale in that geography.
Right. So I think, so when it comes to raising capital, the thing that becomes a challenge is, there's an understanding of what a good agri-tech company would do, and that understanding comes from international markets in terms of what has worked in the West or what has worked in China. So get put investing that time to get VCs to understand that all these assumptions might not hold true for the Indian market. Uh, the clear journey of disintermediation might not be the best approach, or there are other approaches to actually solve this problem. Now, that was challenging initially, right? And so we are very fortunate to have people on our cap table who took the time to understand the problem, to understand the solution, spoke to our users, and then showed that belief and took that leap of faith with for us very early on. uh, Now, that is something that we struggle even today. So even today, getting out there and telling that we are building a business which does not eliminate middlemen, that actually works with them, given all the PR around middlemen, given all the hype around agri laws, it sometimes becomes challenging to do that, right? So it takes more time, it takes more of effort, it takes a consistent conviction in saying that this is something that I believe in, and this is the way we are going to solve the problem. So that was on the fundraising side, and the other was getting the initial traction, and getting identifying the areas, right? So for us, we knew that getting people to adopt to a mobile app for would be difficult, right? So a lot of our users, in fact, for most of our users, Bijak is the first business app that they use. Right? So the only apps that they, other than Bijak, they use are for entertainment or communication, right? So getting them to use their mobile phones to transact was going to be difficult. So we started with Kannauj region of UP, right, where we realized that if it works here, it would work in other parts of the country as well, because the literacy rates kind of are better in other agri output regions, right? So we started from there, didn't have any assumptions. CTO Jitinder worked from there. All of us worked from there. Kind of just camped there for months together, um, to understand that what is the user doing with the app, right? So it had to be an iterative process. We just kept working on it, uh, to finally give one value prop that we could really use very well, and then the idea was to build on that slowly. So now we do financial services, we do logistics, we do global, we run a global platforms as well. But initially, we had to keep things very simple. We had to find just one thing that the user cares about and find the best way of actually delivering it on the app.
And what was that one thing that the user hooked on
So I think
early on?
one thing was uh, party chore hai ki nahi, right? So to translate it to how good is my counterparty? Is it worth taking the risk?
Yeah.
Right. So that was one thing that the user was looking for. That I have request for 20 tons of potato from Sitamarhi. Should I take that risk? Right, of dispatching the produce. So when we started, our rating was just binary good bad, right? That's all. Now we have a more exhaustive system, but the users were willing to give that solution a shot as well, while it was overly simplistic. But they just wanted to know, whether it's okay, right? Are there other outstandings with other suppliers that this particular buyer has or has defaulted on? If you could give me that information, that's good enough for me. So that was the one thing, surprisingly.
And uh, for the user, because he was paid, let's say, X amount of days later after dispatch, that became really
Hmm.
critical. He
Hmm.
was not paid on the date of the transaction.
No, so 80% of agri commodity trades are on credit. Right, so the $300 billion space that we talk about, 80% is on credit, right? So I think from a fintech perspective, agri is a much bigger space than most industries combined. Um Plus, there are a lot of uncertainties, right? So once the produce leaves the premises of the supplier or the farmer, he has absolutely no control over it, right? When the once the produce reaches the destination, what would be prices? Then how would the quality be evaluated? There is typically a 10% quality deduction uh, on an average outside the platform, right? So the agreed upon price is 3 lakhs, but on an average the price actually paid to the farmer or the supplier would be 2,70,000. Sometimes it would be even 50% of the value would be deducted based on you know qualities not as per the expectation, right? So that kind of uncertainty is very difficult for a supplier to handle. So we have seen that of a local aggregator, of all the money that he makes, 85% of it is just risk premium. So if he's going to make 10,000 on a transaction, he actually wants to make just 1,500 rupees on it, right? So he's happy to do the whole job for 1,500 rupees, provided all the risks are eliminated, right? So what has started happening now is, because the risks are lower on the platform, suppliers have started reducing the risk premium, which means that buyers are getting a better price, because that risk premium, which was involved in every transaction, which was 85% of the overall margin that the supplier was making, that goes away.
And if you can describe the funnel for yourself, I know I may be repeating the question again, but just want to uh, get more clarity from you.
Hmm.
So when a farmer is using Bijak, he's using to compare the price of his produce in various markets, right?
Hmm.
What are the
Right.
other use cases you solve for a farmer besides the price comparison?
So I think it invariably starts with comparing prices, yes, right, across different geographies. Now that and these prices change every day, right? So today, Lucknow could be the best market for you. Tomorrow, given the supply that Lucknow is getting, Kanpur might be a better option for you, right? So it's a
Right.
dynamic thing. Now, once a supplier identifies the region that he wants to trade in, then the next thing is which buyer to trade with. Right. So once you have identified Kanpur, there are hundreds of traders in Kanpur. Who should you supply to? Uh, that's second. So first it starts, users come in, they just keep checking the prices, right? Then they keep seeing that, their buyers that they are supplying to, there are better options available out there. Once they, that's our discovery funnel, right? So them discovering a counterparty. Once that counterparty is discovered, then the other things come in, wherein you try to keep the counterparty more accountable, right? So somebody has committed a 7-day payment cycle, so I should get paid on 7th day. So how do you keep the counterparty accountable? That our rating system takes care of. So this is where users start. Now, invariably, as the volume grows, so because suppliers are now able to do more volume or supply to more locations, they feel, so they run out of working capital. And that's when, our partner banks come in, and we start financing those transactions through invoice discounting models. Also, what happens is typically our power users realize that now they are ready to supply to regions where they've never supplied before, and they don't have logistics partners for those destinations, right? So that's when the user moves from discovery accountability services to financial services to logistics services, and that's how the whole spectrum of services gets utilized. Now, once we have enough data on a supplier in terms of what kind of grade, what quality does that suppliers provide, what's the capacity, how much volume can he handle in a week, then we start recommending, picking those suppliers and choosing them for export platform, right? Because we have clear demand on the global side. The challenge there is to be able to identify the right suppliers who can actually meet that demand in a predictable way. So that's when the users migrate to the final leg of the platform, which is the global offering. So that's how the funnel is. It starts with Monday rates and ends up being, users using the whole spectrum of services.
And can you share what does 2022 looks like for you?
Yeah, so it should look exciting. So uh, we have surpassed the projections every year so far. We would love to continue doing that in 2022 as well. So there are a lot of so first 2 years was spent mostly on getting the product right, building the initial credibility in the market. You most markets we went to, there was no user who was using our product, right? So there were no references, there was no word of mouth. So now we are at a stage where we have presence in almost all markets. There's credibility around the brand, around the platform. We have now financial services and logistics services in place. So I think 2022 would be for Bijak a move from just GMV to, a deeper penetration of all these services across our users.
Nakul, if you can share your journey, how you evolved as a founder. What was Nukul looking like in 2019, when he started? What doubts, assumptions he had, and what was Nukul in 2022?
Interesting. So I think one major change that, so there's a mandate for change, right? So we talk a lot about companies evolving and staying nimble, but I think that's true for founders as well. Founders have to evolve with the company, right? So things that made us good founders for the 0 to 1 journey might actually be the things which would make us terrible founders for the 0 to 1 journey. Right? So the very qualities that allowed us to scale Bijak to this stage, which was, a disruptor mindset, style of working where we get involved in every aspect of the business, and try to do things ourselves. So that changed in last 3 years. We started from doing all aspects of business ourselves. So it's for till our seed round, we had no employee. Right? It was just the founders, right? We were doing sales, we were doing, pasting posters and everything. Then we, got team on board, and but we were still uh, kind of recommending or driving the solutions, right? So now we have reached a stage where we just have to drive the vision, but the team actually solves a lot of problems on their own, right? So that is a transition where you have to, let go of a lot of things that you were doing and focus on more strategic aspects of business. The other thing that has changed is, when you start, you have this romantic idea of, you are getting everything done, right? So it's like, I'm building the company, the five of us. Now after 3 years, you realize that, uh, most of the success and most of the failures, there was a limited contribution that you had a contribution in all those aspects, but there are so many things that uh, happen which essentially you can not take credit for at all, right? So it actually makes you calmer, right? When you know there are things, uh, Bijak would grow even without a lot of contribution from you, right? 2 days if you are off work, it will not be end of the world. It's a good feeling. So I think, for the first 2 years, we used to sleep in our cars because we didn't have time to go back home, take a shower, and come back. So we are saving that time as well, right? Ki bahar parking mein we'll go and, take a nap and then come back. Now we have started taking Sunday off, right? So we have realized that, we are moving away from that sprint culture to a more marathon culture, uh, to put it that way.
And what has have been your key learnings during the last 2 years? Be it in operationalizing a company, be it scaling a company, or be it on setting the foundations right.
Hmm. Hmm. So I think, so one of the key learnings has been that you don't over optimize for things too early, right? So it's there's that, temptation of getting every aspect of operation right uh, from day one, because the problems are evolving, because there are so many things that would go wrong which you haven't foreseen. It's better to just, keep working, keep making small progress without worrying too much about perfection at that time, right? So processes evolve when there is a clear need for it, right? So that was one, I think. The other thing that we, learn through the business is, our users are very, very smart, right? So they have been running profitable business for decades, right? So this is especially true for B2B companies, right? So in most of the cases, our users have a better track record of success than we do, right? They understand their P&L very, very well. So you have to drop every assumption. And it's basically your users will teach you how to run your business uh, than any B school or any high profile hire would, right? So that's I think the second part.
And Nukul, what are the resources you go to? What are the books to sharpen your learning as a founder?
Hmm. So I think I read. I don't read for actually self improvement, right? So I should maybe, but I think reading for me has been a, it's a way of de stressing, or it's a way of actually enjoying some time alone rather than, learning anything new. So I stay away from books that are very relevant to my business because that feels like work in some way. And I read things which are essentially just fun, right? So I'm reading The Prize right now, which is this is almost like a biography of oil, the journey of oil from the 1800s to today. I've, I read behavioral psychology. I read books like Sway or The Drunkard's Walk, which are essentially very fundamental. They talk about fundamental mistakes that humans make, or um, gaps, cognitive biases, and all. But when I'm reading them or when I'm picking those books, I seldom think about what I'm gonna gain from it. Right? I do end up getting learning something uh, new, but I don't pick books like that. I think that's something that I do in other aspects of my life as well. And sometimes I feel bad for it, but there's a when you talk to founders, there's a lot of energy that they have. 24/7, where they are constantly working for self improvement or business improvement. um, Networking, meeting the right folks, talking to relevant people, customers, investors, other founders. I try to spend time on Sundays with people who have no idea about my business, who don't care whether I'm scaling, not scaling, what's the retention rate, what are other startups doing. It kind of provides a stability, right? So there's one aspect of my life that does not change at all with the ups and downs of my startup, right? I could have a great month, but the Sunday discussion with my friends would remain the same, right? Because this they don't care about what I'm building, right? Don't even ask the questions about how has the month been so far. So while I'm missing out on the opportunity to talk to someone who can guide me better in scaling the business, but I think it's equally important for me to find one spot in my overall life where which is completely decoupled with what's going on in my business.
That's interesting. And please provide us the list of the last 10 books you have read on various topics. You would like to publish it along with the podcast.
Sure, will do.
One last question is, uh, having five co-founders is very difficult. How do you guys, collaborate, brainstorm, and then decide who is the best solver for that problem or that domain? And how do you five founders know each other? Because for five founders to work today, right, for 3 years, uh, there has to be a lot of background understanding with each other without
Right.
the startups context.
Hmm. Right. So I think the five of us have worked in some capacity or the other with each other in the past, right? So in our past companies, um, sometimes as competitors, right? So we were competing against each other in the same region and as part of other companies. So I think the relationship is built on mutual respect, right? So you're working with someone, you find them smart, you find the work ethic right, or you're working competing with someone and it's a tough battle. You gain some respect for the other person, right? And that's what happened with us, right? So we worked with each other, and so we didn't start with friends, right? So when we were founding team, we felt that it was more important for us to respect each other and their style of working. That's a better adhesive for a team than just liking each other, right? So I can like a lot of people, have great time with them, but I wouldn't want to start a company with them, right? They're fun, but so I think within co-founders what is required is being able to trust each other, right? So if somebody else is working on a particular problem, do you trust them enough to think not think about that problem yourself, right? It's like if Jitender is working on something, I know that crack it, right? Eventually, he'll sooner or later find the best way to solve that problem somehow, right? Uh, Having that trust becomes important, and becomes even more important when you have five co-founders, because all of us are working on different sets of problems, and but we don't have the temptation to say, yeah, maybe I can solve it better, because we trust each other enough. The other aspect of it is, I think we all have a shared or a similar background, right? So we all started with farming families, went to tier one institutes, uh, did work outside agri space for some years, and then decided to come back to agri, right? So because of this similar past, we are very clear about, we are very all of us are very excited about the problem to solve, right? It's okay to have differences about the solution, as long as we are very clear about what is the problem that we want to solve. And there can be a number of solutions to it, so we are not romantically attached to the solution, we are attached to the problem. um, the other thing is, we come with very different skill sets, right? So Mahesh has spent a lot of time on the investing side. Jitender has always been on the tech side. Daya has done dairy, then grains, then fruits and vegetables for the last 7 8 years. And Nikhil has always worked on the data side of things. So that way, I think we know that our skill sets are different. So it's easy for us to just agree upon who will do what.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much, Nukul. It's been a pleasure to
Absolutely.
know you, to know how you think, right, and how you have built such a valuable platform for the entire agri-tech ecosystem for India. Again, kudos to
Thanks a
you
lot.
and congratulations for reaching this far and grow more 100x from here.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Siddharth. Lovely speaking to you.